Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today we're going to be tackling economics.
Ooh, fun.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one. Specifically, we're going to be looking at how classifying different types of goods can actually reveal a lot about the strengths.
And weaknesses.
Yes, and weaknesses, exactly, of the free market.
It's a really interesting framework
It is.
that can help us understand, why
sometimes.
why it works beautifully.
Sometimes.
And other times it's just like, what is going on?
It really falls flat, yeah.
Yeah.
And our guide for this journey is going to be an academic paper by economist Rafael Correa Delgado.
Okay.
And the title is De Tragedias y Esperanzas. El homo económicus, la mano invisible y la realidad.
Catchy.
It is a catchy title.
I know. And it kind of hints at the big questions that we're going to be grappling with today.
Ooh, like what?
Like, does the invisible hand really guide us to the best possible outcomes?
Yes, the invisible hand. Yeah, and are we truly just these self-interested individuals?
Right. The classics.
Like traditional economics often suggests. So,
Big questions.
big questions. So to start us off, why don't we unpack this idea of classifying goods?
Okay, sure. So Correa Delgado argues that we can categorize goods based on two key characteristics.
Okay, I like it.
Two characteristics.
Rivalrousness
Okay.
and exclusivity.
Okay, so rivalrousness meaning
So
if I eat this apple,
yes,
you can't eat this apple.
exactly.
My consumption directly impacts yours.
Yeah, one person's consumption diminishes what's available for others.
Got it.
So that's rivalrous.
Yeah.
A non-rivalrous good, on the other hand, would be something like listening to a podcast.
Okay.
Thousands, even millions of people can listen simultaneously.
Right.
And it doesn't diminish anyone else's experience.
Does that make sense? Okay, what about exclusivity?
So exclusivity is all about whether or not you can prevent someone from consuming a good.
Okay.
So like that apple you were talking about earlier,
Yeah.
that's exclusive. You bought it, it's yours.
Right.
But something like clean air
Okay.
is non-exclusive. You can't really stop someone from breathing it.
Even if they don't contribute to keeping the air clean.
Right, which is a whole other problem, but yeah,
Exactly.
it makes sense. So by combining these two ideas, then rivalrousness and exclusivity,
Yes,
we get this framework.
we do. For understanding different types of goods.
Okay, I like it.
So for example,
Yeah,
that apple we keep talking about,
yeah.
it's both rivalrous and exclusive.
Okay.
So this is a classic example of what economists call a private good.
A private good.
Okay.
What happens when we start playing around with those characteristics then?
Okay, let's play.
Let's play. So what about something like Netflix?
Okay.
I can watch all the shows I want.
Yes.
It's not going to impact your viewing at all.
right.
And they can control who accesses the service through their subscriptions.
Exactly.
So that would be non-rivalrous but exclusive.
Yes. That's a club good.
A club good.
Now think about a congested highway.
Okay.
Rivalrous because each additional car adds to everyone's travel time,
Uh-huh.
but it's non-exclusive because anyone can just drive on it.
Yeah.
So this is a classic example of a common good.
A common good.
Right.
Okay. I'm starting to get this. And then we have things like national defense.
Okay. Yeah.
So that would be non-rivalrous.
Uh-huh.
My protection doesn't diminish yours.
Right.
And it's non-exclusive because you can't really exclude anyone from the security that it provides.
Exactly. That's a classic example of a public good.
A public good. And so this is where I think Correa Delgado's argument starts to get really interesting.
Okay.
Because he points out that the free market, that invisible hand, is only truly efficient in providing private goods.
It likes those private goods.
Yeah, it does seem to like those private goods. So then what about all those other types of goods? The club goods, the common goods, the public goods.
Yeah, things get a little trickier.
Do they? What happens?
Yeah, they're prone to what economists call market failures,
Market failures.
which means the free market, just left to its own devices, might not provide the optimal amount of those goods.
Okay.
And that can lead to some inefficiencies and some less than ideal outcomes.
So like with our congested highway example, everyone piles onto the road even though it makes everyone's commute worse?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Or consider another example that Correa Delgado brings up.
Okay.
Mocha Dick.
Mocha Dick.
Yes, the whale that inspired Moby Dick.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So catching this whale was rivalrous.
Okay.
One whale, one winner.
Right.
But it was not excludable because any whaling ship could try their luck.
So it was a mad dash to try and capture this one whale,
Exactly.
which probably wasn't the most efficient use of resources.
Not at all.
Okay.
It really highlights a potential problem with rivalrous, non-excludable goods. This winner-takes-all dynamic can lead to a lot of wasted effort and even conflict.
Wow. Okay. So we're starting to see how this whole classifying goods idea can help us understand why markets sometimes work well and sometimes just fall short.
Yeah.
But what can we do about these market failures then? Is there a way to fix these situations where the invisible hand just seems to fumble?
Well, that brings us to another key concept.
Ooh, another concept. I
Yeah.
like it.
Externality.
Externalities.
Yeah, it's the idea that sometimes your actions can impact others
Yeah, okay.
without you either bearing the cost or reaping the benefit.
So like if a factory pollutes the environment while producing goods,
Yes, perfect example.
they profit, but everyone else has to breathe the polluted air.
Exactly. That would be a negative externality.
Negative externality.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what would a positive externality be?
So a positive externality could be something like your neighbor plants a beautiful garden
Okay.
and everyone in the neighborhood gets to enjoy it.
Right.
So they benefit, of course.
Yeah.
But so do you, even if you didn't contribute to the gardening.
Right. So these externalities complicate the picture even further when it comes to market efficiency.
They do.
Is there any way to address these unintended consequences?
Well, there is this idea
Okay.
called the Coase theorem.
Coase theorem. Okay.
So the Coase theorem suggests that if property rights are well-defined and transaction costs are low,
Okay.
people can just negotiate their way out of these externality problems.
So in theory, the neighbors could pay for an even bigger garden.
Yes.
Or the people affected by the pollution could pay the factory to reduce their emissions.
You got it.
Yeah.
But there's a catch.
There's always a catch, isn't there?
There is. Yeah, there's always a catch.
Okay, so what's the catch with this Coase theorem? It sounds a little too neat and tidy to be true in the real world.
You're telling me.
Mm.
And you're absolutely right. It often just falls apart in practice.
Okay.
For example, transaction costs, those can be incredibly high.
Yeah.
Imagine trying to coordinate a negotiation between a factory and everyone affected by its pollution.
Oh, yeah.
It just becomes a logistical nightmare.
Right. And who even decides how much everyone gets paid? You know what I mean?
Exactly. It gets really complicated really fast.
Yeah. And then there's a whole issue of putting a price tag on certain things.
Right.
Should a community's health be something that you can just buy your way out of?
Yeah, it's a really good point.
What are some ethical questions here?
Yes, definitely. Some ethical considerations that the Coase theorem just doesn't really address.
Right. And this actually brings us to another fascinating aspect of Correa Delgado's argument.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
It's about the limitations of this idea of homo economicus.
Oh, yeah.
So this is the idea that humans are purely rational, self-interested actors,
Right.
always seeking to maximize their own gain.
Like little robots.
Exactly. Like those robots in those old sci-fi movies,
Yeah.
all logic and no heart.
Exactly.
But Correa Delgado thankfully challenges that assumption.
He does. And how?
So he says that reducing humans to just these purely self-interested calculators, it ignores a crucial aspect of our nature.
And what is that?
It ignores our capacity for cooperation.
Ooh, cooperation.
And to illustrate this, he actually brings up the work of John Nash.
Oh, John Nash.
Yeah, a brilliant mathematician who won a Nobel Prize in economics.
I remember that. Like a
Yeah.
Beautiful Mind.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. That's the one.
That was a great movie.
So Nash's work basically showed that cooperation, not just competition,
Right.
can actually lead to better outcomes for everyone involved.
Interesting.
Yeah. And Correa Delgado actually uses this classic example from game theory
Okay.
called the prisoner's dilemma to illustrate this.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What is the prisoner's dilemma?
So imagine you have two suspects who have been arrested for a crime.
Okay.
They're being held separately,
Okay.
and they can't communicate.
Right.
Each prisoner then has a choice.
Okay.
They can confess to the crime
Right.
and implicate their partner, or they can stay silent.
Oh, so it's a dilemma.
Yes. So what happens is if both prisoners stay silent, they cooperate, right?
Okay.
And they each receive a light sentence.
Okay.
But if one confesses
Okay.
and rats out their partner, the snitch goes free,
Oh, wow.
while the silent one gets hit with a heavy sentence.
Oh, no.
And if they both confess,
Okay.
they each receive a moderate sentence.
Okay, so it's like a chart almost.
Yeah, it's like a little grid of outcomes.
Right. I see.
Yeah. So from each prisoner's perspective,
Uh,
confessing actually seems like the best option no matter what the other prisoner does.
I'll see.
Because if the other person stays silent, you confess and you walk away scot-free.
Ah, okay.
And if the other person confesses, you confess and at least avoid the worst possible outcome.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're incentivized to confess pretty much no matter what.
Exactly.
But I get it.
So it's a classic example of how that individual self-interest, that homo economicus mindset,
Right.
can lead to a less ideal outcome for everyone.
Yeah, even though, like, cooperation would have gotten them both lighter sentences.
Exactly.
Okay.
So this perceived rationality of acting in your own self-interest
Yeah.
leads to a worse outcome for both of them.
Wow, that is fascinating.
Yeah. So even though it seems logical
Right.
to act in your own self-interest,
Yeah.
sometimes that can backfire
Yeah.
and lead to a worse result than if everyone had cooperated.
Yeah, so it really highlights a flaw in that whole homo economicus model.
Yeah, exactly. Because it fails to account for the fact that humans are capable of acting in cooperative, altruistic ways.
Right.
Even when it doesn't seem like it's immediately beneficial to their own self-interest.
You're more complex than that.
Yeah, we are. So are there examples then of humans acting more like humans?
Yes. There are.
Okay, so we've spent some time in this deep dive talking about how classifying goods can help us see where the free market works well and where it kind of falls short.
Yeah.
And we've also touched on how real-world communities can actually manage shared resources through cooperation.
Right.
And this challenges that traditional homo economicus model we talked about.
Exactly.
But how do we actually apply these insights?
That's a great question.
Yeah, like what can the average person take away from all this?
One key takeaway is just be wary of anyone who's offering really simple,
Yeah.
like one-size-fits-all solutions
Right.
to these big, complex economic challenges.
Because they're rarely that simple, are they?
No, they're not.
Okay.
The world is a lot messier than that.
It is.
Yeah.
The next time I hear someone say, the free market can solve any problem, I'm
Right.
going to be like, ah,
Pump the brakes.
pump the brakes. Not so fast.
Remember what we talked about?
Right, because different types of goods often need different approaches.
Exactly.
It's like trying to fix everything with a hammer.
Yes.
A hammer is great for nails,
Of course.
but you wouldn't use it to tighten a screw or saw a piece of wood.
Exactly.
So instead of just blindly relying on that invisible hand,
right.
we need to think a little bit more carefully about what the specific challenge is
Uh-huh.
and consider a broader range of tools and solutions.
We need that whole toolbox.
We need the whole toolbox, exactly.
And this is where thinking about our capacity for cooperation and trust is so important.
Yeah, like that Homo sapiens side of ourselves.
Exactly.
It opens up so many possibilities for more effective and more equitable solutions.
It does.
So instead of just thinking about ourselves as these isolated individuals,
Yeah. Yeah.
just chasing after our own self-interest, we should also remember that we're members of a community
Yes.
with shared goals and responsibilities.
Exactly. And when you start thinking like that, it can change how you view a lot of these economic challenges.
Right, like climate change, for example.
Yeah, that's a perfect example.
Because it's often framed as this tragedy of the commons problem, right?
Right.
Where individuals acting in their own self-interest
Yeah,
end up depleting this shared resource,
Right.
which ultimately harms everyone.
exactly. We all want to drive our cars and enjoy the conveniences of modern life.
Right.
But when we do that collectively,
Yeah,
it contributes to climate change, which impacts all of us in the long run.
exactly. It's a classic example of that narrow focus on individual self-interest
Yes.
leading to collective harm.
Right.
But if we tap into that Homo sapiens side of ourselves, that
Mhm.
capacity for collective action,
Yeah.
maybe we can find ways to actually cooperate and transition to a more sustainable future.
It's not easy, but it's definitely possible.
Yeah, so it's not just about finding the right economic policies.
Right.
It's also about cultivating a different mindset,
Yeah.
a sense of shared responsibility for the well-being of the planet
Yes.
and future generations.
And each other.
Wow, this has been quite the journey today.
It has.
From classifying goods to pondering the limits of Homo economicus
Right.
and exploring the power of cooperation.
Lots of big ideas.
Lots of big ideas. And on that note,
Okay.
we've reached the end of our deep dive.
Wow.
We hope you've enjoyed exploring these ideas with us today
Yeah.
and that you'll keep pondering
Let's keep thinking.
all these
listener.
implications that we've discussed.
The world is full of complex issues
It is.
that need that kind of nuanced thinking and a willingness to see things from different perspectives.
That's so true. So keep asking those questions.
Yes.
Stay curious. And remember, even in a world that's so focused on individual success,
Yeah.
our capacity for cooperation might just be the key to unlocking a better future for everyone.
I like that. I think that's a great takeaway.
So thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks, everyone.